that the CDF is utilizing are supposed to be provided to the citizens through the normal structures of budgeting and implementation, such that then what should happen is Parliament should allocate enough and adequate resources to provide these services within the normal budget process, and Parliament is left with only one role, which is oversight of how these funds are spent. And in the recent past, we've seen, and we are of the view that this is the motivation against this amendment. We've seen members of Parliament using CDF for their own special interest, where you provide the bursary and then the members of the public are requested to fill forms. And once those forms have been filled, when it comes to issuing checks for these bursaries, then the member of parliament shows up and it seems as if he's the one who is issuing these checks. On GAF, we've seen the members of parliament, the women members of parliament, the county members of parliament, they use GAF as a tool of going out to the public and issuing those gas cylinders or as they give to the small traders. They use those for their own political gain. The only person who was not benefiting from all this is the Senate. And that is why the Senate now is being told there is something for you, and therefore they're now thinking about the Senate Oversight Fund. To reiterate what Geshana had said, we already have a proper structure of the financing Senate through the normal budget process, which is clearly elaborated in chapter 12 of the Constitution. And if there was need to come up with any fund, the article that Geshana mentioned, 206.1, read together with the section 24 of the PFM Act, provide for mechanisms of coming up with a public fund that would implement any function that, for whatever reason, cannot be implemented through the normal appropriations. On the other hand, we've seen instances where the Auditor General has raised issues on how the CDF, the current CDF, is spent. We've seen areas where the auditor has said that even the bursaries that we have, we do not have proper repeating for them, and there is a loss of funds through these various CDFs across the country. In our view, whatever this fund intends to implement can be implemented through normal budget appropriations. And if we are saying that as Kenyans, we are going to lose on bursaries or whatever it is, if you look at the amount of money that we are taking to CDFs today, if that money went to, say, education, we would not need anybody to go queue for them to get bursary, because we would have adequate funding for education. And remember, Article 43 of the Constitution provides for economic and social rights, and one of them is education, and many others that are presented there. So it is the role of government to provide these particular services, and therefore we do not see why we should have CDF, given that this is the duplication of roles that are already being taken up by the executive. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander, for that response. And it brings me to a question I want to ask the three of you, and even invite the listeners to respond to. What is the feeling when you look at the role of a member of parliament as it is stated in the Constitution, and looking at everything that we have just talked about, the history of CDF. So CDF happened pre-2010 Constitution, and then there was a shift in what the Supreme Law is, right? But it seemed that the leadership or people who ended up in those positions did not evolve with the Constitution, did not evolve with the Constitution to understand the separation of powers. So in your view, the three of you, do you feel that in a way the presence of these funds, whether regardless of their constitutionality or not, and even the proposal to introduce them, would it then further blur the lines, and make it harder for citizens to actually see the value of the roles of legislation, oversight, representation? While you're thinking about that question, there's someone here called Keith who's requested to. It says still connecting. Keith, you're a speaker now. Please ask your question so that they can address the two as we go around. Keith Kasim, you're a speaker now.
Okay, thank you, Galendo, for this opportunity. Yes, and I find it is as a problem that the people that came into office right after the 2010 dispensation constitution was promulgated, they didn't evolve with it. And at times when I look at this CDF issue, I wonder why is it provided for, and how have we been entertaining all this time these people taking these funds and literally choosing how they will spend it when it's not even provided for in the constitution. The constitution is so clear about the roles of the members of parliament, and so my only problem is that we can discuss as much as we want, but I don't know, how do we make this our voices heard to these parliamentarians, because they're the ones who want this money. I even saw a picture where they were trying to influence the public participation process, in that even though we are giving out our views about how this bill should be done, or how it should be amended, how do we make it to count? Because the same people that are going to vote for this bill are the same people in the barazas Komatanga, trying to sell it to the public how much they need it, yet it's just like a pocket money for them, you know. And I think we should plan a way how we should communicate this clearly to make our voices heard, because I'm afraid that our views will just go with the stream and it won't count. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, for that comment. And we will get into the public participation bit so far on the bill, and I'm hoping the panelists here will respond to you. I have added Nicolo. I hope I'm reading your name correctly. Please also ask your question, and we'll pause there with the questions for now so that we don't overload the panelists. Go for it, tafadhali.
Thank you. Mine was not really a question. Mine is just to give my 2 cents about what has been happening as far as the amendment of the constitution is concerned. I'm a lawyer by profession, so I'm privy to what has been happening in our legislative space. Generally, my opinion is the biggest disconnect what we have in the country is that we have a very weak legislative arm of government in terms of accountability that's supposed to be there, in terms of them speaking for the common citizen. And case in point is what has happened in the recently released Finance Bill 2025. I know this may not be the right space to talk about it, but just to shed light on it is that we are seeing an increase in the amount of items which are no longer zero rated and they're exempted. So these are items which affect the common man on a day-to-day basis. A case in point is the inclusion of VAT in packaging of medicines, the inclusion of VAT in things like diapers and sanitary pads and all that. And these are things which cut to the core of the common man. These are things which the common man uses on a day-to-day basis. And if we did have, if the separation of power doctrine had been looked into, then we would not have been having these issues. I heard Mr. Gishana say that the parliamentarians have been, it's like they've been taken ransom with how the CDF thing is going, whereby they are threatened they are threatened with the threat of the CDF being withdrawn if they don't support these bills. And that is also part of the problem, because we cannot have a legislature which is in bed with the executive, for lack of a better word. Yet those who elected them there, elected them for the sole purpose of them speaking for the common man. So in as far as amendments are concerned, our constitution is one of the most rigid constitutions we have in the world, whereby even the smallest clause that you want to amend requires so much public participation. And my plea to most of the listeners as I finish off is that let us take a keen interest in all that is happening around us. Because the moment we embrace apathy, the moment we fail to take into consideration what is happening in as far as amending of laws which affect us on a daily basis, that's the moment we lose the plot, and that's when we shall drop the ball. Because we are at a point where we can't trust our legislators to speak for us as the common electorate. So my plea to each one and every one of you is please participate, please involve yourself, because one thing with politics or governance is that the moment you fail to participate, then all sorts of policies and laws will be enacted to your detriment. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolo. I appreciate your sentiments that you shared with us. And I would like to invite the panelists to speak to these questions or comments that have been raised. And after that, I would like to invite Bungela Mayut to actually take us through the public participation process, the public hearings that Nicolo, you've alluded to, drawing from experiences in the past 2 days. We'd like to hear those experiences. So to the panelists, if you have any responses to the questions or comments that have been shared, please unmute yourselves and go for it.
Perhaps I could go first with the issue of whether
Yes.
CDF has affected the role of MPs as we know it. And what I do have to say is that, as Gishana has mentioned, is that for MPs, the key roles that are there constitutionally is to represent, to legislate, and to oversight. And we could also include budget making in that. But I believe that CDF has been used, and I think since 2010, as a tool, not just for development, but also as a tool to show that the member of parliament is working, which then provides a mismatch with what the constitution expects a member of parliament to do and what they're actually doing on the ground. And then that leads to the situation that we're currently seeing, where we see that members of parliament are speaking in public and saying that they really do not have any business being in parliament, speaking in parliament, and that their role does not entail debating or engaging in plenary within parliament. Then that raises critical questions about their understanding, first of all, of their fulfillment of parliamentary roles and responsibilities, but also it also speaks to the understanding of us as citizens of what do we expect our member of parliament to do. In the ongoing process, I think we've seen across the country that's currently going on for this bill, when you hear for some of the people who speak about what CDF does for them, you hear things to do with development, you hear buildings, you hear of bursaries, which fair enough has brought development, but is that really what the constitution envisioned for members of parliament to be doing? Should they not be in parliament legislating? Should they not be in parliament representing? Should they not be in parliament conducting oversight within the laid out structures that are currently in parliament, whether it's in the committees or in in plenary, but they should be in parliament. So what then does that mean when we remove parliamentarians from the precincts of parliament? Because for you to do this work, you have to be there physically. You can't be an absent MP and claim that you're representing your people effectively or conducting oversight or legislating if you're not actually there. So what then does that mean for these roles? And does it speak towards, I would say, perhaps ensuring that us as citizens understand the roles of members of parliament? And this is an issue that we've seen time and again. Even if you look at Mzalendo's parliamentary scorecard for last year, where we had a higher number of quorum hitches, you'd see that at very many times you'd find that parliament had to be adjourned because members of parliament did not meet quorum, whether for plenary, especially for plenary, and they were not contributing as well on the floor of the House. And you find that then this raises an issue, and it goes back to what I think Nick has spoken about, the weak, nature of parliament and how it has been co-opted, I would say, by other arms of government. And it then reflects deeper systemic issues within parliamentary participation. We need to understand that members of parliament are there for us, and this CDF is just an excuse that they use to say, perhaps I'm not in parliament because I'm on the ground doing this and this. But as we've seen, even from the Auditor General report and what Alexander has mentioned, no constituency met the threshold for that unqualified opinion. None of them met that threshold. So what work then are members of parliament doing? I'm not saying that none of them are distributing these bursaries or building the schools or whatever that they're doing, but the key work remains in parliament for them to be able to ensure that there's accountability, transparency, effective representation, legislation. They have to be there. And so, again, this also brings about the issue that has been brought about with what we saw last year and the growing dissatisfaction with the quality of representation and oversight that we have of members of parliament and how they conduct themselves. And so I believe that this whole issue of CDF perhaps is, I'd say, one aspect that is trying to be used to show that members of parliament are working, but in actual sense, they're not doing what they're meant to do, and they're actually undermining the oath that they took to uphold and protect the constitution as well as to represent their constituencies. And so their effectiveness, I think we have to really, something that we as citizens have to keep pushing. Their effectiveness can only be measured on their commitment to oversight, their commitment to legislation, and their commitment to representation. Anything other than that, I think, is unconstitutional and is a waste of time.
Thank you so much, Katua. Alexander and Dr. Gichana, do you have any comments or a response to those two questions?
Sorry, I don't know whether you could repeat the questions. I may have just not really.
So there weren't essentially questions, but there was one comment from Niklo who raised his dissatisfaction with Parliament's independence and how they are exercising or using the powers that have been vested in the House. Yeah, and initially I had asked almost something along the same lines on whether with the presence of CDF or this other fund, CDF, NGAF, and now the Senate Oversight Fund, present and whatever is being proposed now with the law, would it then further blur the lines between the role of members of parliament? And when I say members of parliament, we understand that we're talking about both senators and members of the National Assembly, and even, like their service delivery, or rather undermine the weight or the gravity of the other roles, the main roles that have been enshrined in the Constitution of legislation, oversight, and representation. Your thoughts on that?
Thanks a lot, and I think I fully agree with what Katua said insofar as the impact all this has on the effectiveness of members of parliament in executing what is constitutionally supposed to be their mandate. And you don't really need a lot to be able to understand that it's actually affecting what they're supposed to be doing. Just look at what happened last year with the finance bill, right? Look at how members of parliament acted throughout that process, and mainly because CDF was threatened. Look at how Parliament has dealt with all the issues relating to the whole Protestant Gen Z movement, and even as we speak right now, when you look at how they're even reacting to even the release of the documentary by BBC, how they treat control of budget reports with respect to accountability, because you see, the moment you have someone who actually is pulling strings, it means one, you can't do your job, and then two, you can't ask them to do their job properly. When it comes to now the Auditor General talking about money being borrowed without parliamentary approval, money being borrowed and used for purpose which they were actually not meant for, wastefulness insofar as funds are being used at the national level, and you see all these comes back to Parliament for Parliament to be able to demand for accountability and recommend remedial measures. But when you have, a string attached to you and is being pulled at any particular given time when you want to actually exercise what is constitutionally your role, it becomes very difficult for you to be able to do that, which means that all issues that come before Parliament will never really have be addressed with the objectivity and with the effectiveness that is required. All questions of an accountability and wastefulness and corruption and misappropriation, and the whole issue of debt being misappropriated for functions for which it was not borrowed for, all these issues which Parliament is supposed to step up to ensure that we are a fiscally sustainable country, that there is accountability, that public debt is used in a sustainable way, and that the executive is accountable insofar as public expenditure is concerned. All these issues will never really get the attention that it requires, even if you get hundreds of Auditor General reports, which are damning insofar as the national executive and all other entities are concerned. Now, when you realize that you have a fund whose main problem is that it's actually interfering with the devolved system structure and principles of devolution, now it gets to a point now where for you to continue being relevant, what you're doing now is demonizing the other thing that is you're being compared to. That's why you get members of parliament standing in parliament and saying, oh, devolution is not working. Governors are just wasting money. It is useless. We should do away with it. In fact, CDF has done more than counties have done, which is wholly inaccurate. And one of the things which you understand is that members of the public hold these leaders to a particular level of credibility. And sometimes when they say statements as those, you realize that it impacts the extent to which members of the public appreciate the role of counties. It impacts the extent to which even members of the public cooperate insofar as the delivery of functions at the county level is concerned, how they pay their rates, how they even engage with counties. It impacts the ability of parliament to even pass laws that are intended constitutionally to offer support insofar as the implementation of devolution is concerned, to make strict the whole exercise of oversight on how counties are spending money. So when you complain that counties are wasting money, it is your role to undertake oversight, both the Senate and the National Assembly. Why not pass laws that are intended to ensure that oversight is effective at the county level? Why not pass laws to ensure that if capacity is the problem at the county level, we, in execution of our mandate under the Constitution to provide support to counties, we have passed a law to enable, or rather to instruct the National Treasury or the State Department for Devolution to be able to actually undertake particular initiatives to ensure that this new structure referred to as devolution actually functions and uses the money that it gets effectively. Now, instead of ensuring that we are facilitating development, we are strengthening the institutions and the structure of devolution, and we're ensuring accountability, we are undercutting devolution. We are, giving devolution a bad name when we don't really think about the long-term impact that we have in terms of how these structures operate going forward. So members of parliament need to completely be divorced from this issue of managing of funds from whatever level, and they should now return their focus primarily on their role insofar as legislation, representation, and oversight is concerned. So that at least we have them focusing on the effectiveness of institutions, results, and accountability. among other things. So if we are able to, so in as much as the bill as it is does not say members of parliament are going to be running these funds, we are operating and arguing on the basis of what we've seen historically all the way from 2013 up to now, and how members of parliament have been very keen to ensure that this fund is given unto them. So what we are doing now is we're giving the executive an extra string now attached to the Senate and attached to women representatives in the National Assembly. Now we're giving the executive complete control of parliament, because now if I want National Assembly members, if it's the women reps, we have GAF. If it's the members of the National Assembly, we have CDF. If I want the Senate, I have the Senate Oversight Fund. So we are giving the executive an extra string instead of actually cutting those strings to ensure that parliament exercises the functions which the Constitution allocates to them. So I think the best thing we can do going forward is find a way to be able to spread the truth about what is actually happening and what's behind the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill, to ensure that we oppose any attempt to mutilate the Constitution, to sneak in provisions that are inconsistent with the principles of the Constitution, to be able to waste public funds over initiatives which, one, are unnecessary, and two, if at all we wanted to go ahead with them, we can still be able to implement them without wasting as much money as we are trying to waste. So the best thing to do is continue with advocacy and ensure that everyone in your circle understands the truth about how this is going to affect the various ways in which we actually want to move forward as a country, and therefore oppose it. And if it comes to a referendum, ensure that we actually vote to defeat this constitutional amendment, to ensure that we do not reverse the gains we've already experienced under the new constitution, and that members of parliament are given a chance to be able to do that which they are required to do constitutionally. Thank you.
Thank you, Gichana. And I hope that has responded to your question, Niklo. For Alexander, I want you to respond to the comment or the question that asked how we can strengthen our participation or make sure that our voices count. But before you do, let me invite Bunge la Mayut to share their experiences with the public hearings that have been happening on Monday and Tuesday and today, and come to an end tomorrow. What have you seen on the ground in as far as having sufficient information, whether it's from online platforms, so Parliament's website, whether it's mobilization? Have you seen any mobilization being conducted? Have you received such messages? And what's been the experience once you get to this constituency offices when you went to submit your views on the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill? So I'll invite Bunge la Mayut to give us that experience, and then Alexander, you can respond to that aspect of public participation and ensuring that the voices of the citizens count.
Thank you, Lois, and thank you to the panel so far for the good job. So for us, Bunge la Mayut is really to encourage young people to participate in the legislative processes. And so in doing so, we take lead in going to the ground and also participating in submitting memoranda. So for this particular bill, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Bill of 2025, there was first the open call for participation, which came out on 15th March. This one is, of course, for the written memoranda, which the deadline for this is June 10th, sorry. And for the public hearings that started on Monday, the call out initially came out on the 21st of April. This is what was gazetted. So I bring this up because it's where we started the story on Monday. So the advertisement that was put out in the Gazette notice on the April of 2021 put out the venues for public hearing as the 47 county headquarters, or rather it was to be consolidated into 47 venues with across the 47 counties. So one of the areas that was to cover participation for Nairobi County was the KICC, And so this is where we made our first stop on Monday morning at around 10 a.m. So when we got to KICC, it was a very interesting experience. We've been there before for public participation, and we've never had any issues. But from the get-go, from the entrance, asking the guards at the entrance if there was any public participation happening, they were not aware. So this is at the main entrance of the building. And after that, we were redirected to the main entrance of KICC, where the entrances that lead to the ballrooms that usually host the public participation. So again, from at that point, the guards didn't have any information as well. And the other thing is that they had to inquire from the higher ups if there was anything happening. And the only thing that we could be told is that the only participation that was happening was around something around that was being hosted by the Ministry of Tourism. So for us, that was already a red flag in that, of course, being the venue that had been publicized, we would expect if there was any change of information that they would make it, they would have even the guards aware. And secondly, it was that the guards themselves are, of course, Kenyan citizens. So we'd expect them to also be aware of the information and to participate in the process itself. So after calls here and there with the team from KICC and a few other people, we were told that there had been a change in the venues, and contrary to what had been publicized, that hearings would be within the 47 locations across the countries. Now participation was taking place across the 290 constituency offices. These are the offices where the MPs, or rather, are supposed to be sitting when they visit the constituency. So they have the 290 constituency offices and the 47 offices under the women rep. So that's where participation was supposed to take place. So naturally, the next course of action was to try ascertain if this information was credible. So we made our first stop at Westlands. Westlands is under the MP Team Wanyoni, and the constituency offices are around Kiuna Close, that is around the Red Hill Road. And so when we got there, the first thing, you get into the gate. It's a guarded compound, of course. And from the entrance point, we could find the guys who were issuing the templates. So Parliament had put out a template that could be used for public views, sort of simplify the process of submitting memoranda. And of course, this started out with the impeachment last year. So they were using a similar template to that. It had highlighted what the amendment bill was trying to, or rather is seeking to entrench into the constitution. And secondly, it had broken down the views section into three portions. I think the first one was one stating if you support the amendment bill. So you either write support or oppose. You're given those two options. And then on the second and third section is if you support, you give your reasons, and if you oppose, you also give your reasons. You write them down. So at the gate, we had a gentleman who was issuing this. So at first, you're given a form where you fill in your details, and then you issued with the templates. So what stood out for us in this particular location was that the guy who was issuing out the templates was directing people in what to fill out. So he told them that the order of the day was writing we support the amendment bill. The other thing that stood out was that there was no one explaining what the different funds that are being sought to be entrenched into the constitution are about. So we only had an explanation of the CDF, and the hype was around the CDF having helped people, school fees, and all that. Those were some of the reasons that were being listed down on paper, and the other was mostly roads and all those things. So this was one of the things that we picked out in the Westlands. So on Tuesday, again, we set out to at least do a spot check on other locations to see if there was something similar. So we went to Kiambu, we made our way to Langata, we made our way to Kibra, parts of Limuru, more or less a similar experience. So you issued with a template, no explanation. The assistants were supposed to take you through the process, have no idea of what is being discussed in the bill. They're only there to just issue you with a template. In Kiambu and Dagoretti, we got explainer documents. This one was breaking down the parts of what the process was about. It explained the bill in itself, a section of it, and then it explained the constitution, or rather the public participation process, what is expected after this, and the steps that Parliament is going to be taking. And perhaps the other thing we also noticed is that there wasn't much turnout, and especially from young people. A lot of the people that we encountered on the ground were much older. And so this, of course, was of concern because of course, last year with the finance bill and everything, young people were at the forefront. But for this particular bill, we've not seen as much, especially physical participation. So the other thing that perhaps I would like to point out is that there has been a lot of confusion, of course, with the notices. First, it was with the 47 locations, and then now it has gone down to the 290 offices and the 47 county women rep offices. So that in itself has brought a lot of confusion because there are two different posters that are going around, and people are not aware of what is happening. For example, in Limuru, when we got to the Boda Boda stage, we asked around what was happening. No one had an idea of where participation was taking place, and if at all there was any participation. So that in itself shows that there hasn't been really good publicization of the bill and the processes. And the other thing that we also noted is that there wasn't involvement of the Senate. So a lot of this, the venues have been in the 290 constituency offices, but there was no mention of any Senate offices. We're not even sure if they are Senate offices or where we're supposed to have senators address us on the oversight fund, if at all they need to address us in this case. And then, of course, we've also gotten reports of a few places that have not had participation in regards to the women rep offices. So tomorrow we'll be out verifying this as well. And then perhaps the other thing we also noticed with communication from Parliament was that initially, and this was as late as Saturday before the public hearing, is that we had two different set of templates for participation. So the initial template had broken down the different sections to cover comments on the three funds, but the latest template has consolidated all this, and you only have to say whether you support or oppose the bill as a whole. There's no specification of whether it's the funds, so we don't know if you do not support the, say for example, in GAF, what happens if you don't, or rather if you support the NGCF and the oversight and not the GAF fund. It's a whole, it has been blanketed together. So we don't know how efficient that makes the process. So I think so far those are the things that we've noted, unless there are any other questions, Lois.
Now that covers it, and your experience mirrors some of what our team has experienced. We've had some of our officers going to the ground to see how the public hearings are being conducted. So one of them said that the people who are manning the public participation tent were would just tell him that to support CDF, it's an issue since everyone has supported it. And then another one also highlighted that today they had gone to visit the Kiambu women representative office, and they found that there was no activity there was no public participation. So overall, it's showing, it's demonstrating that there's a big shortcoming still with public participation, of course, with the absence of a public participation legal framework to dictate how it should be conducted. And so I would like to invite Alexander to respond to these experiences, but also to Nico's initial question. I think it was Nico's or Keith, regarding how citizens can ensure then that they make their voices heard, while taking into consideration that mobilization isn't being done efficiently, the civic education and even the bill on the ground in the public hearing venues is not being done well, because some of the experiences have highlighted that the officials who have been involved in this process themselves do not know what the bill is about. They've just been assigned a job. So then how then can this be a meaningful process, taking into consideration these shortcomings for Kenyans to ensure that their voices are heard? And once you're done with your response, I would invite the two people I have enabled here to speak. There's Matanga and then there's Mwende. I will invite you to ask your questions or submit your comments once Alexander has given a response. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's quite a pity to hear what is happening out there. In my view, the charade of the public participation we are having is choreographed to a certain outcome. And this could be similar to what we saw with the impeachment proceedings, where even what we've been seeing in the media, anybody who is against CDF is frowned upon, and the way the public participation is happening, even in some instances, the members of parliament are the ones who are leading in the discussions and telling people, do you support what we are doing with CDF and that sort of a thing, and whipping emotions. And I will start from where you stopped, where we currently don't have clear legislation that supports how adequate public participation should happen. We currently have a bill that is going through some motions with the Office of the Attorney General, and we hope that at the end of the day we will have a law that would provide thresholds for adequate public participation. However, in my view, what should be happening first is the citizens being taken through what the bill is about, and not just on CDF, but on the other two funds that the bill is they're trying to bring on board. And then after you have been taken through that, you're taken through the legality of the whole process. So that then, as you provide your views, you're providing views in a manner that is informed. Two, it should be clear after you provided your views, how are those views going to be utilized? Are they going to see a change in the bill and that sort of a thing? But now what we are seeing in this current process, the end is predetermined. And that is why you have a form that is issued to you at the gate. You're not even told, you're not even taken through any civic education on the same. However, all is not lost. We have a place to provide the written memoranda by the 10th of June to Parliament. Hopefully, as we provide the memoranda, we'll be invited to go and provide our views. We also hope that the Commission on Revenue Allocation is going to be invited to provide their views, given that this is an issue that deals with the sharing of government revenue. They should provide their views. And in my view, this bill again touches on Senate issues and issues that touch on counties. Therefore, the bill should proceed to the Senate. It is worrying to hear that Senate is not involved in any way so far. We hope that after this process, the Senate will also be involved before the end of this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. I would like to invite Matanga and then Mwende. I'll request you to keep your questions brief because we are way past the time we had allocated. So we should be closing soon. Matanga, please go first.
Okay, thank you so much. Personally, the reason why I decided to request you for me to be the speaker here is because there's something that is going on that is really agitating me, because it really seems that we are really more focused on the CDF as part of that amendment bill. And I think the last speaker has spoken the most important thing about that bill, the Senate Oversight Fund. There's also another fund that's being planned to be entrenched in the Constitution. That's the Affirmative Action Fund. These three funds. Now, guys, look here, we have a problem. And the problem of the CDF, it did not start yesterday. And for me, I feel like, yes, we may be having very incompetent leaders. As part of Kenyans, it's also alarming at the same time, because the CDF started all the way in 2000 when it was being formulated. The amount that was allocated was, I think, 1.5 billion, which was 2.5% of the national revenue, which is increasing. By 2013, it was about 5.4 billion. And I think by last year, I believe, it should be more than 50 billion. That's for the CDF. Now, if you look at the act itself, the CDF Act 2013 was to repeal the CDF Act 2003. Then there was a petition, I think, in the High Court of Kenya. They're realizing there is a problem. They went ahead and came up with the MGCDF Act 2015 to repeal some of the sections that those who are in the High Court, they found that they were contentious. The case went ahead until it was, I think, in 2000, up to the Supreme Court. And all these issues that you're talking here, they are in that decision. That's the decision of the Institute for Accountability. All this is about this thing being the role of the senator. This bill must be sent to the senator. If you go to the about the amendment of the Constitution, any amendment to do with the function of the parliament, which you're talking here, they want to give themselves a function. It must be a referendum. And since these parliamentarians have noticed that we are, go back to that, even the CDF Act of 2013 that was declared unconstitutional, and which again, Amendment Bill of 2025 want to add it in the Constitution. It's adding a fund that was established by a statute that is unconstitutional already. The passing of the Act of the 2013, it was introduced on Parliament on 6th, I think, to 6th of August. I can't really remember, but it was passed on 8th August. And the President has said it, I think it was on 13th September. The same thing that's happening right now. So I think Kenyans, we need to take our time and read this. I think last month or so, I believe, because I remember there's one of our lawyers who was trying to go to the TV, and I told him to talk about this bill, and we just ignore it. And it is the time that already the parliamentarians have come to us, and they've told us there's public participation. The same problem that happened during the Rigathi Gachagua, the public participation, we ignored. We said, since it is Gachagua, let him go. They came up with fake results, and all of us knew, no, that is not the view of the public. And it's the same strategy that they're using to entrench this fund in our constitutions. Guys, we have what we call the equalization funds. It is not working. We don't believe CDF should be working and should be there. And my comment will be, when it comes to the legal profession, I believe those working in state offices, they have shown the highest level of incompetence. Because these bills, I believe, they go through them, they suggest them. And as Kenyans, we have mastered the art of ignorance. So for me, I don't have any question to the panelists. The only thing that I would want us to do, let us go read this amendment. Let us understand this fund. We already have the problem of the CDF. Despite it being unconstitutional, the disbursement has been happening. Even up to last year, 50.4 billion, it's going ahead. Another problem is the Senate Oversight Fund. I have not heard any senator talking about the same. Another thing is the affirmative action fund. Like, why do we need all these things? Why do we need all these things? We don't need all these things. The issue to do with the role of parliament, it is to legislate, not to execute. The same issue was addressed in that Supreme Court decisions. So the only thing I'll urge any lawyer, any Kenyan, go to that Supreme Court decision of the Institute for Accountability and two others versus the National Assembly. Read it. All those things you're talking here are there. And this has been there since 2022. And when you're feeling now, this is the problem.
Thank you for that,
Let
Matam.
us try not to be ignorant. So let me drop the mic at that point.
Thank you for sharing those those sentiments that we support, that more Kenyans should endeavor to educate themselves. And it's for this reason that the likes of Mzalendo, the likes of TISA and Katiba exist to fill this gap. So our request to you then would be to amplify any of those resources that you believe would be helpful to even inform your own circles, whether it's at work, whether it's in social circles, to ensure that more Kenyans are informed, first of all, and they are able to be in a position to influence those policies that are being proposed. Mwende, I would like you to go next with your question or comment, and then we will have the panelists respond to this. Then we wrap up.
I hope you can hear me.
You're a bit low. Try to be louder.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So thank you so much, Mzalendo Watch and Bunge la Mayut, for this space, and to our amazing panelists that have taken time to educate us on the bill. So I'll just go straight to my set of questions. I think my first question is, I know there's been a lot of communication towards public participation for the bill. And so I wanted to ask what specific channels have been used and how effective are they? I'd give a reference to the Gashagwa public participation that was happening, I think, earlier on this year or last year. And so many channels were used, mainstream media, social media, chief barazas, and so many other platforms. And so if the same effort could be put into these other bills, then we could probably achieve the public participation we want. And so maybe my question would be, what are some of those channels that are being currently used, and how effective are they? Are they actually reaching the common mwananchi? And then my next question would be the inclusivity and understanding of the policies that we are calling people to come and participate in. So I know a lot of times when you hear the bills and policies, we think of lawyers, but some of us are not lawyers. So you'll find that a lot of technical language that is being used in bills and policies that can be very, very hard for a common mwananchi to understand. I think somebody pointed it out here. There was a lot of participation during finance bill. One of the things that stood out, translation of the finance bill. So if the same cannot happen for these other bills, then how can we have public participation happening when people do not understand why they need to be there? So what can be done to ensure that public participation happens in an inclusive manner? We have sign language interpreters, we have audio form explanations of the bills and policies that are being, discussed at that point. My other question would be, during the previous Constitution Amendment Bill 2024, the one that is calling for increase in the, have you said something?
No, please go ahead.
Okay. The one that is calling for increase in the term limit for the president. And I remember there was a lot of mobilization towards public participation, but then on the final day, we get feedback that the servers crashed. So how motivating is it if people do actually take time to go through the bill, to understand the bill, to write memorandums about the bill, but then we are told the servers crashed? How can that, that is not motivating at all. So how can that be controlled so that we don't have a repetition of the same? So we don't have the same feedback coming back to us that even after you guys took active participation in that process, we didn't get your feedback because apparently the servers crashed. And my final question is, I know you said public participation and public hearing. So I don't know if there's a difference between the two. And the fact that public participation is ending tomorrow, does that mean that's the end of when the emails can be sent, or there's still more space for the emails to be sent? So I'd say those are my questions, and thank you so much for this platform. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Monde, for the questions and the comment. I think I'll just answer the last question that you've asked. It's the same process, public participation. I think it's just the difference is in the format in which the process is done. So, yes, they have allocated 4 days for public hearings, but it does not stop Kenyans from submitting written views through email or even dropping the hard copies of their submissions to the National Assembly, and that will go until 10th June. And to that effect, I will say that even with previous bills, how Parliament, both houses, conduct themselves in the allocation of time, and also the the path they take, whether it's public hearings or the written memoranda or both on a particular bill. It's very selective because there is no legal grounding that then requires them to have, a bare minimum specification where you say at the very least Kenyans should have at least say 3 weeks or a month to participate. So it's at the discretion of the clerks of the houses. But I'll say to the Kenyans, they have till 10th June to continue submitting their views. And so thank you so much for those questions. And I will invite my panelists to respond or react to the questions and the comments as we close, starting with Alexander. Alexander, can you hear me? I can see you've unmuted yourself. Are you able to hear me? While you're sorting that out, let me invite Sylvia. You can react to the comments or the questions on public participation based off of your experience at Mzalendo.
Okay. So I think that public participation as it is, there's that lacuna in the law, as you've mentioned, Lois, because there's no particular legislation that seeks to address this. Nzalendo is trying to lead together with other partners, with other civil society partners, to try and push for a public participation bill, and that will eventually become an act that will be able to deal with all these issues that have been raised by Mwende, especially on issues of feedback, on issues of whether indeed the submissions do get to the committee, on issues of even accessibility to the public hearings, issues of non-implementation, because as we've seen, even for this particular process, there has been discretion for some of the constituency offices. They have been open today. Like today, I think one in Kiambu was closed, yet others were open, and yesterday that was the case. So there's not that uniformity, and yet the process for giving feedback on this bill physically through these public hearings is supposed to take place through this very short period of time. And of course, the perennial issue that we've had regarding the number of days that is given by either the National Assembly and the Senate on specific bills. For some bills, you'll see that there is interest, political interest, and so you'll see that resources are given. Members of parliament are mobilized to be able to go and engage with the public on the particular matter, and public hearings are quickly convened, even in a very short period of time. And I think we've seen that example, especially with the impeachment of the previous deputy president last year. And then you also have some other bills which, either just because parliament is disinterested or, does not have the necessary quote unquote public force, if I could say that, then public participation period given for submission is quite short as well. And then you have very little time. And then also for bills that perhaps Parliament understands that there would be very high interest in it, and yet the public does have high interest in those bills, the time is also short. And so people are not able to have enough time to go through the lengthy documents and pages, and whether it's amendments, and look at the the original acts, just to be able to refer and all that. And so all these issues have come up, and we do understand that there are these challenges. But for us as Mzalendo, I think our position is first engage in the process. You asked whether there's a difference between public hearing and public participation. The public hearing is the process, not the process, but I'd say the meeting, the convening that is done by members of parliament or by the committee specifically that's dealing with the particular bill. And so they invite people to come and give their oral submissions. But public participation is just the act of engaging, and you can always engage with the bill from the moment it is published and read for the first time in parliament. Even before they put out the call for public participation, you can always begin sending in your comments, and Mzalendo is always there to highlight, where the stages of the bill, and you can always reach out to us to find out where exactly the bill is and whether you can be able to give in your feedback. The best time to give your feedback for public participation would be before the bill heads to second reading in the House, because by then the members of parliament will begin substantively engaging on the principles and the objects of the bill and on the bill itself before they now move to the committee stage, which is our lengthier process. And so while we acknowledge the challenges that public participation does have in the country, and we keep pushing for reforms, we believe that we should still keep engaging. We should not give up. And I think last year's events also showed us that there is power in just speaking out, there's power in participating for all of us. And we would also encourage us to keep continuing this for the same. However, I would also want to just say that we've also seen changes over the years as an organization, as because we monitor parliament and we keep an eye on parliament. Previously, especially in the 12th parliament, that's 2017 to 2022, very few committees actually came back to say, these were the views you gave us, this is how they were adopted into the report, and then eventually into the bill. That wasn't there. But with the 13th parliament, you've seen a deliberate attempt by committees to look into the feedback given by stakeholders. Each and every stakeholder, list them all in the report. And so you'll see whether it's myself, Sylvia Katua, these are the recommendations I gave. And then the committee says this was adopted or this was not adopted, or perhaps this touches on other legislation and will be dealt with at another time. Of course, there's room for improvement, because we now need, I'd say, in terms of administrative, we need to know exactly why this was not taken up and why not. And that's a process. But I will say there have been some changes within the 13th parliament. And so as we progress towards these things, I'd say for public participation, the important thing is just show up, be there, make sure that you just put in your views and you encourage those around you and the stakeholders, particularly for that sector as well, to be able to give their views on those particular issues, so that we can just ensure the strength and the efficacy of public participation, even as we keep pushing for law. Yes, I think that would be it from my end, Lois.
Thank you, Katua. I think we've lost Alexander. Dr. Gichana, do you want to go?
Thanks. I think mine is going to be very brief, and just probably respond specifically to the point which was made by, was it Kairet or Mwende? I don't know whether they're the same person.
It's the same person.
Okay. Yes, on the question of the language that is used and the accessibility of the language, and how we can be able to ensure that we break it down for purposes of ensuring everybody knows what's happening and understands what the bill is trying to do. Obviously, I don't know whether she's been able to interact with what Katiba Institute put out, I think, a few days back, which was basically just an explainer of what contentions we had as Katiba Institute with respect to the bill, in a way that was easy for the members of the public to understand. So if you've been able to see that, that would be great. But if you haven't, you can look at Katiba Institute's X handle and be able to follow and see where we've actually indicated, what we raised in the petition that is before the court. If you are able to understand that, then our request would be to be able to, broadcast that as much as you can, share that within your circles, reduce it. We saw the level of advocacy that happened around the finance bill last year. If we're able to do even half of that level of advocacy, I think it'll go a long way in ensuring that the larger part of the public is actually aware of what exactly the problems with the bill is, and they are also join us in terms of calling for accountability insofar as what Parliament is trying to do is concerned. So have a look at it, see if you understand it. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us through our social media handles for purposes of either explaining various aspects of that explainer to you, so that at least we are here and we're willing to assist insofar as breaking down this to members of the public or to anyone of us here today, to ensure that the better we understand it, the better we explain to the members of the public, and the more we have people who understand why the bill is actually not in the interest of the country and the interest of the Kenyan people. So that would be probably just my response.
Thank you, Gichana. And I appreciate your your input, yourself, Katua and Alexander. And I would like to urge Matanga and everyone else listening, and Mwende also, for the concerns that you have raised, that regardless of the absence of the law, we urge you to continue pushing and submitting your views, and the resources are there in plenty. Like I mentioned earlier, Katiba Institute is a good organization where you can get more insight on legal issues, constitutional issues, and even this bill in question. What is the petition talking about? So that it can then enlighten you some more if you haven't submitted your views, so that you can do so from an informed place. And as I close, I want to also urge that public hearings come to an end tomorrow. So if you still don't know the venue that's close to you, please look at our pages, both Mzalendo and Bunge la Youth. We have updated those venues as they were advertised by the National Assembly. And equally, it's to remember that public participation or submission of the views, especially written views, does not stop until 10th June. And so those templates have been made available also on our social media platforms. We will reshare them for you. Please find them. And there's a bilingual version of the bill, there's a Swahili version of the bill, and an English version. You can use those to educate the spaces that you are in. So remember to, when you're submitting your written views, you can also copy us on email, so that we are able to just track the kind of volume of views that have been submitted to Parliament. We may not have an accurate number, but it gives us an idea of what Kenyans are saying on the bill. So check out our handles, that is at Mzalendo Watch and at Bunge la Youth. So you can find all these resources, and we will keep resharing them from tomorrow, the last day of public hearings. We'd want to hear your experiences, so please feel free to tweet us. Reach out if you need any information. As I've mentioned, Katiba, TISA, Mzalendo, and even Bunge la Youth are available to answer any questions. We continue, it's a continuous learning process, and I believe even this session has been a great learning experience for us to understand not just the bill that is in discussion, but also the context in which this bill exists, the past, the legal issues that have existed, and even the present, and what it's trying to address. So I'd like to appreciate everyone who's joined us and sat with us for over 2 hours. I thank all of you. I thank the people who posed questions for us. We have responded to them, but feel free to post more questions, and we will respond to them promptly. I would like to appreciate our panelists for giving us so much insight. We have come out of here having gained something, and I believe each of us will continue with our individual role as Wazalendo to inform the spaces that we are in, so that we are able to continue influencing policies and how laws are made in this country, and generally governance. So thank you once again. Continue following us, continue engaging us, and we will catch up soon. So more details will be shared. Thank you, and have a blessed night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.